최근 비트코인만 하락했는데 결정적인 이유는 무엇이라고 보시나요?
Yeah, there's been really three areas that have caused Bitcoin to decline in the last year. One of them is AI data centers. So AI data centers are being built globally, but especially in the US, it's caused energy prices to go up tremendously, which causes Bitcoin mining companies to have to pay more in energy costs. Usually in a 4-year cycle, Bitcoin will drop every 4 years because that's when the Bitcoin miners begin to sell their Bitcoin to pay for things like new data centers, energy cost, new infrastructure. This came early in this cycle because energy costs got so high that a lot of Bitcoin miners had to sell their Bitcoin in order to pay for that energy cost. The second reason is Bitcoin whales. A lot of the OGs out there had price targets of $100,000 Bitcoin to sell at. And when Bitcoin hit $100,000, a lot of the whales began to sell. So they've been selling all year long and probably aren't coming back. The third reason is prediction markets. Prediction markets have picked up a lot of steam in several countries, including the US. And a lot of the speculators have been moving over to prediction markets to speculate as opposed to the crypto markets. So that's caused a slowdown in volume and the price of Bitcoin to drop.
그럼에도 불구하고 월가가 긍정 전망을 유지하는 근거는 무엇인가요?
Yeah, so really the pullback had to do with those three areas that I mentioned, but Wall Street is embracing Bitcoin. One of the reasons why is Wall Street's been wanting Bitcoin ETFs for a very long time, and we finally launched Bitcoin ETFs in the US about 3 years ago. So once that happened, a lot of the big players, pension companies, insurance companies, endowments, even sovereign wealth funds have been buying up Bitcoin ETFs. The ETFs create a structure that allows it to be a little bit better for Wall Street players to own it as opposed to just owning the token directly. It also gathers a lot of interest from the larger speculators. So the speculators I mentioned before are more retail, but the larger speculators are now hedge funds. So they can now buy the Bitcoin ETF and then sell futures for the basis trade, which is a big trade that happens among a lot of hedge funds. It's something that we do as well. And ETFs and options and futures on those ETFs help us to do that. So there's been a lot of demand on Wall Street. And that demand, I believe in the long run, is going to offset some of the headwinds that we've been facing over the last year.
리플이나 알트코인의 역할은 어떻게 변하는 건가요?
So as far as currency goes, Bitcoin is the dominant cryptocurrency, meaning it's used for transactions primarily. The competitor to Bitcoin, it actually isn't a strong competitor, but it's also a complement to Bitcoin, is Litecoin. So that's one that we're very constructive on. And Litecoin has two features that we believe helps out in utilizing it as a currency. Number one, it's faster, it's smaller, and it's secure. So it's Bitcoin, but just a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper. So people like to use Litecoin in that manner, but Litecoin also has established privacy features that Bitcoin doesn't have. So those privacy features allow you to elect to make your wallet private or to make your transactions private, which helps people that are really focused on privacy, which I believe is going to be the next iteration in cryptocurrencies that's important. Another cryptocurrency that we like a whole lot is Ripple or XRP. We launched a XRP ETF in the US because we believe that they're building the rails for financial services. They're probably the leading platform for financial transactions in the US that Wall Street wants to actually use. And they're building things like stable coins can be utilized on it and other tokenization projects as well. So that's a really big one in our opinion. And then finally, we also like one called Hedera. Hedera is a cryptocurrency that, or HBAR is the cryptocurrency for the Hedera network, which is really used for enterprise solutions. So think about Oracle, but Oracle on the blockchain, or Intel on the blockchain. So those are the ones that we're very, very focused on. And then finally, open source protocols. Ethereum is one that's mentioned. I believe Ethereum was really the trailblazer in the early days, but a lot of other ones are coming in as open source protocols that are probably overtaking them in speed and functionality. Some of the ones that we really like are Injective, Sui, or Say. Those are ones that really resonate, in our opinion, for the new open source protocol tokens.
지난 몇 년간은 비트코인 안착기였다면 올해부터 어떤 암호화폐로 돈이 이동할 것으로 예측하시나요?
Yeah, so 2026 will likely be crypto winter, and it's already here. And, every 4 years, there's that 1 year of the bear market that we all expect if we've been in the Bitcoin or the crypto ecosystem for a long time. I believe that 2026 is going to be the year for real world adoption and real world use cases. And some of the tokens that I mentioned, like XRP, HBAR, Injective, Litecoin, they're going to be looked at for their uses and adoption for things like stablecoin and tokenization, which are becoming a really big deal right now globally. Even the largest Wall Street firms are focused on tokenization right now. So this is going to be the year for adoption. This is going to be the year for use cases that actually make an impact and not just a lot of hype, which some bull markets have been very hype, but this time it's going to be real use.
미국 정부와 기관이 선택한 암호화폐의 대규모 자금이 유입되는 추세인데 그럼에도 불구하고 차트에는 큰 변화가 없는 이유가 뭘까요?
Well, there's two sides of price. One of them is real adoption, and the governments around the world are now approving more Bitcoin adoption across financial platforms. However, we are still in a bear market cycle right now. So you've got people exiting as well as speculators that are exiting while Wall Street and global financial services are moving in. Once that rotation finishes, then you'll start seeing prices move up again, which I believe is going to be later in 2026, probably September, October, or maybe even to 2027. So the next bull cycle I do expect to last a lot longer than the typical 3 years, given that the financialization of crypto is now here and governments have now passed either laws or given standards on how crypto adoption can actually work within markets. And they've all been very positive.
비트코인과 주요 알트코인의 상한가와 하한가를 경제위기와 불장으로 나누어 예상해 본다면 어떻게 보시나요?
Yeah, my expectation for Bitcoin is to go as low as $60,000 to $65,000 a token in 2026. So that really is my downside case. It could be less if macro conditions worsen. But at the moment, macro conditions aren't necessarily great. If you look at places like the United States, for instance, consumer debt is very high, default rates are very high, and this is also replicated around the world, particularly in Europe. China is experiencing massive property devaluations at the moment. In Japan, they're having to actually give stimulus checks to people so they can afford things like electricity and food. So a lot of countries are already in a recession at the moment. But what generally happens following recession is money printing. And as central banks begin to ramp up their money printer again, which is already happening in the US, and I'm expecting other countries to follow very soon, when more money is printed, then all assets begin to rise. So that is really what's going to cause the macro conditions to change and prices to begin to go up again. And that happens to coincide with the 4-year cycle. And I don't believe that will start happening until this summer or later in the early fall. But once that happens, I do expect Bitcoin to go as high as $250,000. Now, other tokens that I've mentioned that are have a lot more functionality for things like tokenization, such as XRP, HBAR, I do expect those to double or even triple over the next 4 years.
비트코인 금과 달리 희소성이 부족한 알트코인들의 투자 가치가 있다고 보는 근거는 무엇인가요?
Well, there's two ways that I like to invest in altcoins. One of them is a direct investment where I buy and hold for a very long time. The other way is through trading, and you can trade in any market, whether it's going up or down. So I do have a view that 2026 is going to be a down market for most cryptocurrencies. So I don't really advise a lot of long-term or even short-term investors in this market. It's a great market for trading though. However, Bitcoin has come down quite a bit already. So it's already below $75,000, and I do believe it'll go as low as 65, maybe even 60,000. What that means is if you're a long-term holder of Bitcoin or even one of the altcoins that we mentioned, such as XRP, Litecoin, Solana, now's not a bad time to start buying, anticipating that eventually the market's going to turn the other way. It's impossible to really time the bottom of the market, but the markets have come in so much that I do believe that it's a good time to start making small investments now in anticipation for the market turning over.
비트코인보다 수십 배 흔들리는 알트코인 장세, 심리적으로 어떤 자세를 갖고 있어야 할까요?
Well, if you're a retail investor that is looking to make long-term investments, there are two factors that I would look at. The first one is I would look at the top 20 in market cap, because once they've moved into the top 20, then it's going to be a little bit more stable and not quite as volatile. But sometimes the volatility is a feature, not a bug. The second thing that I would say is look at where things are being built. And if you're looking at the top 20 and you're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of products being built on top of those blockchains, then that means it probably has a little bit of staying power. So some of the things that we're looking at that are top 20 tokens are our XRP, our Hedera, SWI is really interesting right now, as well as Solana. So those are the ones that are going to be a little bit less volatile, a little bit better long-term solution. And if you see people and developers moving away from those blockchains and into something else, then that's probably the right time to sell.
소액 투자 시 최적의 암호화폐 포트폴리오는 무엇일까요?
Yeah, look, I think a core portfolio is probably 5 of your favorite names. I think everybody's going to be a little bit different. You should pick the ones that resonates most with you. It's sort of like buying stocks, right? If you have Apple products, you probably want to buy Apple if you understand it and you think it's great. If you have Samsung TVs all throughout your house, you probably want to own Samsung. So same thing with cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin obviously is a strong core holding for most. I do believe that a lot of the upside has been played out in Bitcoin. So you're probably better off holding, tech stocks. But for altcoins, I think core holdings would include something like XRP, Solana, SWI. Those are the top that come to mind. I think Litecoin is extremely interesting as well. HBAR, CRO, BNB. Those are two that are really interesting that represent the exchanges Crypto.com and Binance. So if those are platforms that you use a lot and that you really enjoy, then that is probably a good core holding for you as well.
글로벌 시장은 이미 알트코인 ETF가 제도권에 안착하고 있습니다. 한국 시장 개방의 로드맵은 어떻게 예측하시나요?
Yeah, I think the Korean market is a very interesting market for ETFs. One of the reasons why is even though the US is a very large country, the won, Bitcoin, and won other altcoin currencies are often the largest pair trades. Several times, the Korean won will overtake the US dollar in pairs across several cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. So I think Korea is probably one of the strongest places for cryptocurrency investment. There's already investments directly into cryptocurrencies. And my hope is that South Korea will have an opportunity to actually launch ETFs in the very, very near future. So I'm looking forward to that day, and I think the best way that gets done is probably through positive legislation that helps that economy and helps the regulators begin to adopt crypto ETFs. Well, my final message to everybody is to be diligent, be patient, and employ really good risk management. Don't invest more money than you can afford to lose. As with anything, if you over leverage yourself and try too hard to make wins, the markets can at any time turn the other direction. So be very careful.